Okay. All right. Oh, sorry about that, folks. We started again, and hopefully we're on air this time. Yeah, we're on there now. Brilliant. Oh, we'll have to start again. Sorry about that. Yeah.
Welcome to Raconteurs.
Good evening and welcome to Raconteurs News. It's chilly Tuesday evening. We've had a great weekend. I hope you all have. And as always, I'm joined by good friend and co-host Jason Holmes. Good evening, Jason. How's your weekend been? Well, we had a bit of a false start there when Freeman Jack dropped. Somehow I didn't manage to take the stream, but I was just saying when we did the introduction before we actually got on air how sick to death I am of all this fighting and falling out between various people in different groups who should at the end of the day be all heading for the same thing. So I just wanted to mention that as it seems to be becoming more and more prominent at really, really sickening trend in the movement that we're in. But I think we need to get away from that. And tonight we've got some very special guests, and it's a subject we've not covered before. But tonight we're joined by Trudi Benjamin from the Jeremy Bamber campaign. Good evening, Trudi. No, you're more than welcome. We always like to address any injustices that we can as and when we can. And Jason made contact with you, and it's going to be really great to get you on and talk about what's going on. So just for the sake of the listeners who might be a bit younger than ourselves or perhaps haven't heard of this particular case, can you give us a bit of background with the Jeremy Bamber case and how you actually came to be involved as well, please?
Had gone berserk with a shotgun, and that was really it. Not much time to react, and the phone went dead. So you can imagine the horror and the terror for a 23-year-old in that situation. So having called the police then told him to meet them at the farmhouse, which he duly did. He got there about 10 to 4 in the morning, was met there by 2 police officers, and they did a bit of a recce of the farmhouse to see what they could ascertain was going on, really. So that's how it all started.
So the first report, the first thing that anybody heard from the authorities was that his sister, they weren't they adopted?
Yes,
am I right in saying they were adopted? Yeah.
Yes, unfortunately, his parents, Neville and June Bamber, were unable to have children on their own. So they did adopt Sheila and Jeremy. And, quite rightly, that's what they did. And
Sheila was quite a troubled soul, wasn't she? She'd had a lot of problems in the past. I think she'd suffered from paranoid schizophrenia in the past. And for that... For somebody to for the first report to be that Sheila's going mad with a shotgun, what happened subsequently doesn't quite add up, does it?
Well, she had been hospitalised twice before, and she was diagnosed schizophrenia. I think you have to remember that we're in the middle of the 80s. This was a farming community. They had quite a standing in the village. Neville himself was a magistrate. June was a very quiet, church-going lady, and it's not something that they had ever really talked about. I'm not saying it was swept under the carpet, but it was something that I don't think, the wider family and friends were really aware to the extent of how mentally ill she had been. She had been in the hospital in the March leading up to the, sort of the tragedies. And, she had been quite mentally ill. She was on medication and she hadn't had custody of her children. So she really was, a very ill and quite a tragic figure, really.
Yeah. Do you know, I had just had a question right on the tip of my tongue and now it's completely disappeared. It was... I think. Oh, that's right. What I was going to say is that I wanted to sort of put this into some sort of geographical context. Whereabouts was this?
In Essex.
In Essex. Which part of Essex was that?
Near Chelmsford, basically.
Near Chelmsford.
Yeah,
okay.
yeah. That's probably the nearest, closest, largest city. So very much sort of more towards the Norfolk side, and they were, like I say, they farmed acres of land, quite a lovely farmhouse that they had got, which was leased from a charitable trust, I believe, on a long-term lease, and it was quite the imposing property. Reasonably wealthy individuals running a very successful farming business.
Oh, and what was Jeremy's life like at that time, his normal life before this incident?
Well, he had been, a very fortunate young man in so much as he had been able to travel, much like kids today would take sort of a gap year, I suppose. He had gone to a local college, and I think he had done an A-level or two, and he then spent a bit of time travelling around. I think he was working in a restaurant and just, having that young man life, really. Farming was in his blood, and he was always going to be settling down to take over the businesses and do the farming. But as I say, he was in a fortunate position that he was able to his parents were able to give him this, and it certainly didn't seem like they had begrudged giving him that. They were glad he'd been able to have those experiences. So it had really been in that year that he had really settled down to farming, and just, it was harvest time. He was, getting in the harvest, basically. So it was a normal, long working physical day on the farm. He's described it as quite a solitary life when you're out on the tractor all day, but certainly a life that he enjoyed, and he realised how lucky he was, really.
Yeah, absolutely. So if we go back to the incident in question, did you say it was
Yeah.
August in 1986?
In 1985, the 7th of
1985,
August.
sorry.
Yeah, 7th of
86 when his
August.
trial was.
Correct. Yeah,
Right.
correct. Yeah, he wasn't tried until October 1986.
So we've got this night. We've had this report from somebody at the house has phoned in saying that Sheila. What was her surname? I can't remember her surname. It began with C.
Sheila Caffell. That was her
Caffell,
married
that's
name.
correct.
She was divorced, but that was her married name.
Yeah. So we've got this report into police that Sheila's gone mad with the shotgun.
Neville, his father, phoned Jeremy, and then Jeremy phoned the police.
Right. Okay. That's quite important, isn't it? I mean,
it becomes more important.
Second-hand information.
Yeah, it becomes more important as we progress with the story, because, of course, what we now know is that also his father phoned the police. But, of course, the jury didn't know that at the time. So that's quite an important fact, which is established later in the game, basically.
So we're talking 4 people dead, gunshot wounds, I'm assuming.
Yeah.
Now, you would have thought that because Sheila had a history of mental illness, you would have thought she would have been the prime suspect. You would have thought that pretty much it was an open and shut case.
Well, in the end, of course, we ended up with 5 people dead because Sheila subsequently shot herself. And so it was basically deemed as a murder-suicide. And that is what the police believed. The bodies were released for cremation burial, and it was a closed case, basically.
What changed that, though? What changed that? What made that go from a closed case, a murder-suicide, pretty straightforward, terrible tragedy? What changed that to where we're looking at another person of committing all these offences, all these crimes?
Well, it wasn't until really the relatives of the family, the aunt and the uncle and the cousins, started asking questions of the police. They started to think that it was a possibility that Jeremy had done this. They couldn't believe that Sheila could have done this. They couldn't believe that she could have taken a shotgun, been able to load it, and kill her family. And so they started asking very difficult questions. And then, of course, subsequently, a few days later, once the police had handed back the keys, they went in and they apparently found a silencer in a box in a cupboard, which the police had missed. So that was the start of it, basically.
Okay, so from that moment on, it went from being a murder-suicide to something a little bit more sinister, and this was as a result of the family being given the keys back and doing their own search.
Yeah, but no, not initially. I mean, initially the police officer who was in charge, Taft Jones, he sent the family away. He didn't believe it for a second. He wasn't having any of it. As far as he was concerned, he knew that she committed the murders and then shot herself. So it really wasn't until much later that this happened. Jeremy was taken in for questioning. There had been a burglary at the caravan park, which he basically wholly admitted to, that he owned a 25% share in the caravan park, and he explains the situation as he was testing out security, because he had been, arguing with the other shareholders that security was lapsed. And so they did subsequently charge him with that burglary, and his girlfriend would have been charged as well. And this is where things took a bit of a turn, really, because they released him without charge, and they tested the sound moderator, and they said that a tiny fleck of blood in the moderator was Sheila's, and so it matched her blood type, basically. Okay. DNA wasn't around.
85. There's no not much DNA technology
just
there, is
beginning, just beginning to start, but no, not really. And so it was all to do with blood types. And so obviously the inference being, if her blood was in the moderator, then of course she couldn't have shot herself and then put it back in a cupboard in a box. So, there's where the leap started. They also pulled in Julie Mugford for questioning, who was Jeremy's ex-girlfriend, and she, over several interviews, multiple interviews, dozens of interviews, subsequently said that he would murder his family. And so Jeremy was brought back in and he was charged, basically. So, there was no forensics linking Jeremy, and the silencer certainly wasn't linked to Jeremy. It was just the leap they took that if there was her blood type in there, then she could not have committed the murder.
Wasn't there a particular statement that his girlfriend at the time had made to police, either before or she changed her statement and implicated him in the incident itself?
She initially said that he had told her that he was planning to kill his family, and she testified that he had said that a number of times, that this is what was going to happen. And then, subsequently in interviews, she then said he told her that he had hired a hitman for £2,000, and that a hitman had gone in that night and killed the family. And this turned out to be a complete lie. The man that she named had a strong, solid alibi, and he was dismissed from the inquiry very, very quickly. So, that's another one of those lies, I think, that was told, that just did not happen. Yeah,
it's anomalous, isn't it? Sorry, but I think we didn't do our full housekeeping when we first started. So we've also got Michael O'Brien on the line with us as well. So I wanted to welcome you, Michael. How are you doing, Michael?
Yeah, I'm fine.
You okay? Can you sort of, I just want to give Trudy just, a couple of minutes while we just chat with you, and where do you fit in on this?
Well, I served 11 years and 43 days of a sentence that I didn't do. I was wrongly convicted of a Cardiff newsagent in 1987, and this is where I met Jeremy Bamber on my travels.
Sorry, the murder of a Cardiff newsagent.
Yeah, he was a murderer of a Cardiff newsagent, right. Yes, in the town centre, and myself and my two co-accused were known collectively as we were dubbed the Cardiff Newsagent 3, in our campaign, and it took us 11 years and 43 days before we overturned that conviction. Again, it was very, suspect evidence. There was no forensic evidence linking us to the crime. They were only looking for one person, but it seemed like in the 80s there was quite a lot of miscarriages of justices going on at that particular time. It wasn't just down in Wales. It was like with Jeremy. That's how I met Jeremy Bamber. I met him in Long Lartin prison, and that's how.
How did you find him?
I found him a pleasant person, to be honest with you. I mean, he was very straightforward. I mean, he said things as they were. I believed that he didn't do it. He stood out like a sore thumb for me. He was like a needle in a haystack, and you could see that something wasn't right, because you look at this man and he just didn't fit in anywhere, and I didn't fit in either. So that's how we seemed to get on quite well. And, we talked about, we've been on hunger strike together, me and Jeremy, with many other innocent people at Christmas times, fighting for our freedom. So, I was in Long Lartin for a number of years with him. So I would say he's definitely innocent. There's no doubt in my mind that he's not capable of committing this crime. He's not that type of person. I mean, he's quite a gentle person.
Yeah, I seem to remember around that time there was a number of miscarriages of justice. Of course, there's the Northern Ireland people, the Guildford 4 and the Birmingham 6. And there was also the I think this was probably 70s, but again, it's around about the same time. It's the Carl Bridgewater, was it?
I was in with
before to murder as well. Those people that were convicted of that were released. The British penal system is littered with these, and we're not talking about somebody who's been wrongfully convicted of nicking a newspaper or of nicking some milk off somebody's lawn. We're talking about murder. We're talking about something that takes someone's life away.
Crimes, yeah, very serious crimes. And the other thing is when a miscarriage of justice occurs, it's not just a miscarriage of justice some people have got to deal with. I mean, my daughter died when I was on remand. She was only 4 months old. She died of a cot death. I lost my wife. She ran off with my friend. And my stepfather died when I was in prison, and I was only 19 years of age. Then I got a life sentence on top. So people just think about the miscarriage of justice, but it's the other injustices. Like with Jeremy, he hasn't had a chance to grieve for his family because of the injustice which has been done to him. So, it's not just the miscarriage of justice which affects people like Jeremy or like myself. There's other tragedies which come with it, unfortunately. I think that's only fair to point out.
Yeah, it's something that must be hard for anyone to imagine unless they've actually experienced it, like you have, Michael. For me, I'm thankful that I've never actually been in prison, but to imagine what it's like to be locked in there for years for something you didn't do, and for all the world to be thinking you're a murderer, I don't know how you cope with that.
I had no choice. You got two choices when a miscarriage of justice has happened. You either sink or you swim. Mm-hmm. And I decided to swim. It took me a long time. It took me 2 years. I went through the drink and drug stage in prison. There was more drugs in prison than what it is on the outside, And I mean, I went through that phase where I couldn't cope and I was just taking drugs just to forget everything. But then there was other innocent people, like the Vincent Hickey of the Cowbridge Water. I actually knew Vincent Hickey well. He helped me to pull my head together. Birmingham 6, some of them were in there as well. They helped me to fight back and told me what to do. I mean, I had no education when I went into prison. I didn't know how to write even a standard letter. So I didn't even know who to write to because, I was 19 years of age. What do you do? So these people took me under their wing, thankfully, and told me what to do. And then when the fire burned inside me, I started studying law, which is what I did. And I turned myself into a legal eagle. And I even, one of my famous cases is access to journalists, prisoners' access to journalists. That's my case. Myself and a guy called Ian Sims took the Home Secretary, Michael Howard, to court to allow journalists to come in and visit us and report on our cases because they were trying to ban that from happening. Well, I was lucky that I managed to get my appeal and I won my case. But I wanted to continue with the House of Lords case for the ones which was left behind, like Jeremy, which is important because, Jeremy needs to have a voice and they still putting obstacles in his way when it comes to the media. And he should be able to talk to the media just like I was allowed to. There is no difference other than the fact that he's done double my time. And I think that's, the best way I can put it. But I bet I'd stake my life that Jeremy is an innocent person. I mean, he passed the lie detector test. He's done everything he can to prove his innocence, And, I don't know whether I could have coped with 31 years in prison. And you've got to admire the man for his strength.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
In the face of adversity,
Well, admire Jeremy for his strength and you for yours, because what you went through, obviously it wasn't as long, but it was equally as devastating. And the kind of spin-off things that happened as a result of you being incarcerated or whilst you were incarcerated, it's just so much to deal with. And I think you've done a great job, and the fact that you're helping other people is absolutely inspiring.
Well, I think, when you look at Jeremy's case, and any reasonable person, just look at the evidence. This is what I always say to everybody. Look at the evidence and put your hand on your heart and tell me that Jeremy did this crime, because I know they can't. because there's just so much evidence. And obviously, I think Trudi will back me up here in the sense there is more evidence being found. Obviously, we can't talk about it for legal reasons live on air at the moment because it could jeopardise any future appeal. But rest assured, the evidence is actually there for all to see if they want to see it. But you've got to open your mind and look at the evidence. Never mind about, reading what the newspapers have wrote about Jeremy. Forget what the Daily Mail or the Express said. Just look at the evidence itself. And, you wouldn't convict a cat today on what Jeremy got convicted of. And that's the harsh reality and the sad thing about it.
Yeah. And as somebody who I spent 6 days on remand in a prison in Dorchester Prison in 1988. I spent 6 days, and for me to sit here and think back to those days, and then think to myself, right, you're still not out. You haven't done anything wrong, but you are still in prison, and from that point there to this point here, you're still in prison, and that's. That to me is it's torture, absolute torture. Trudi, shall we get back to Jeremy's case? As we're going chronologically, he's been arrested. Yeah. And then what transpired? What are the key points?
Well, he was, you rightly said, he was arrested and charged, and went to trial. But we now know what happened with the trial is that evidence was just, held back. A disclosure was, really, really poor. For instance, people couldn't take the leap that Sheila could have taken a rifle and killed her entire family, but they were never allowed to examine her psychiatric records properly. We never saw her medical records. There were, other issues which, the jury never heard about. It's quite mind-boggling when you think about it now, that we're still trying to get some of that disclosure 31 years later. And of course, we know now masses more than what was, Jeremy's always had theories about what went wrong very early on, but he could never really pin it down. And, it's only years later being able to, sort of fill in the pieces of the jigsaw, really, that we've been able to piece together what we know now. And that's where we're at. That's why we keep doing what we're doing, because we have to find a way to get back in the Court of Appeal. It's extremely difficult, as everybody in this situation will attest to. Jeremy's had 2 failed appeals, and people think, oh, you must have run out of steam. There must be nothing, but of course there is. I mean, the star witness was Judy Mugford, who was a very angry, very bitter young lady, who had been jilted by Jeremy. I think he'd been perhaps cheating on her a little bit with her friend, which will sort of, that'll make anybody angry. And she was facing quite serious charges of burglary. There was drugs offences. There was a checkbook fraud which she'd committed with her friend, and she was at school in London and she was training to be a teacher. And for a 21-year-old young lady just beginning her life, I imagine that was quite a scary situation that she'd found herself in. And so she became really the star witness. She testified that, as I said before, he had said he was going to kill his family, and he had hired a hitman to do so, which we now know is a lie. What the jury didn't know was that she had already, she had a lawyer and she had negotiated a contract with the News of the World for £25,000, and which was, a colossal amount in those days. And the minute the trial ended and there was a guilty verdict, she was taken to a hotel, and there she appears, scantily clad, on a full-page spread in the News of the World, and collected a nice little check. And so, that cannot be right. that is just so wrong on so many levels. But the jury were never aware of that fact. They were never aware that that was going to happen. So it's and lots of issues with statements, etc. I could go on.
How was Jeremy treated initially when he was arrested by the police? I know that in 1985, I don't even think PACE was even introduced, was it? The Police and Criminal Evidence Act. I think that was 1988. But we're in a time before PACE. We're in sort of that no man's land between the 70s, where we were just convicting everybody on shoddy evidence and planting evidence and doing things like that we got in the 70s, and we're sort of transitioning towards PACE and trying to reform how people are held in custody and how they're questioned and things like that. How was Jeremy treated?
Well, I think, as you rightly say, PACE was about 1986, so there was really, there wasn't those procedures in place. I don't know of any, brutality or anything like that in terms of that regard, but I do know that he was taken in for questioning originally for about 6 days. And I don't think there was any suspicion that he was going to be charged at that point. And he certainly didn't think he was going to be. He just thought he would tell the truth. And, he was just basically helping them with inquiries, as they say. But he was 2 days without a solicitor because he didn't feel, that there was anything to hide. He was just going to tell the truth of what happened. And it was only later, I think, when things got more serious that a solicitor was brought in for him. So I don't think that would be allowed to happen now. I think he would probably have a solicitor from the off, but he was never asked if he wanted one, and it was never provided. So that is the only thing I possibly could say, but I certainly don't know of any other issues surrounding that original arrest. Well, not arrest, just brought in for questioning. He wasn't arrested till later.
Right, so it was just asked to attend the police station rather than being under arrest.
Exactly. He was the only remaining member of that family, and of course, almost like a debriefing, I suppose, to go through the events of the day, what had happened, how everybody was behaving. I would have thought that was a fairly normal, standard thing in a case like that, even in the 80s. But he certainly didn't think he was going to be charged. I have asked him before, what was he thinking when Julie Mugford came out with what she had said, and he said he just thought she was being stupid. Like, he just thought she was going to, he couldn't understand what on earth she was doing. He just thought, she was just angry and it was some sort of payback. But as I say, you don't know what kind of pressure she was under at that time. You don't know. I can't put myself in her head. I have no idea.
Michael, what year was it that you were first arrested for the offence that you were eventually jailed?
1987.
So we're talking about around about the same time. How was your experience with the police at that time?
Well, I had a totally different treatment to what Jeremy, by the sound of it. I was handcuffed to hot radiators for long periods of time. I was denied access to a lawyer. We were denied food and water. And when they done my appeal, there was 115 breaches of the Police and Criminal Evidence Act. That gives you some idea how much they abused my rights whilst in the police station. 115. You can say one or two is an accident and they wasn't familiar with the PACE Act, but when it's 115, I think you can say that's quite deliberate. I think there's no other word for it. But handcuffing to us to hot radiators and tormenting us, saying we're going to get you, we're going to make sure you get a life sentence, and they were adamant, no matter what. They already made their mind up before we were even questioned.
And you were 19 at this time?
I was 19 years of age, and when I say I was scared, I've never been so scared in all my life. I lived on a tough council estate, and that didn't bother me, you know what I mean, with all the hard knocks and whatever. But believe me, when I was in that police station, I was absolutely terrified because I was watching what they were doing and there was nothing I could do about it. What could a 19-year-old do? They wouldn't even allow me to see my lawyers. It was scary, very scary.
It must have been, Michael. for a 19-year-old to go through that and realise that you're perhaps looking at losing your liberty for the rest of your natural days it doesn't get really any more scary than that, does it?
Well, I wrote. I don't know whether you're aware. I wrote a number of books over the years. My first book, my autobiography, is called The Death of Justice, and it's never been questioned by the police in what I put in there about what they did to me. They paid me out one of the highest awards ever for a victim of a miscarriage of justice from suing the police of £300,000. Normally, the maximum amount you get is 50. They paid me £300,000 because of the level of abuse. They didn't admit liability, but it was a misfeasance in the public office, and it's the highest award ever. That tells its own story, because they don't give you that kind of money if they didn't do anything wrong. Mm. And this one police officer in particular had a habit of being outside the cells and alleging a conversation took place between inmates, and he had done it in previous cases as well, and we weren't aware of that. So when my lawyers, my good lawyers, got involved, I mean, Gareth Pearce was a godsend, and she come in and looked at my case. She started doing research into this particular police officer, and he got a record as long as your arm for making up these confessions. But lo and behold, the jury didn't believe him in numerous cases. Had the jury known that at my trial, had the jury would have known that my co-accused had confessed to crimes he hasn't done before, and they proved that he didn't do it before, then the case wouldn't have even got off the ground. And that's the sad part about it. But I think going forward, going back to Jeremy's case, my experience is to try and help other people. And because I knew Jeremy, a friend of mine recently got out after 35 years, and he's still fighting his case from Liverpool. And he's been released on parole. Jeremy hasn't even got that chance, I don't believe, because they're saying it's natural life. So we've got to get him out. There's no ifs or buts. We have to get him out. And the only persons who are going to get him out is the lawyers, campaigners like Trudy, the people who are working hard behind the scenes to find new evidence. The new evidence is there. I hope it's strong enough to get it back to the Court of Appeal through the Criminal Cases Review Commission. I really do.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, well, I think we all hope that anybody that's read the notes, anybody that's looked at the evidence, anybody with the right mind, shall we say, who's not got a vested interest or a personal agenda, then they can see that this is it's at least questionable to a reasonable doubt, which is what it should have been in the first place. So we've got the story so far, and we've got your perspective as well, Michael, from getting arrested in a similar situation around about the same time. Now, I understand that at Jeremy's trial, he was only convicted on a majority verdict. Is that right?
Yeah, that's correct, and that is one of the the startling things. And of course, he was given 25 years, or the judge recommended a 25-year sentence, and as was the sort of procedure of the day, that would then go to the Lord Chief Justice to give an opinion, and he said the same, 25 years. But he also sort of clarified and said, but for me, I would never release him. And that's a really important statement he made, because that was what really came back to bite Jeremy later. The Home Secretary then would give a recommendation based on what those two people had said. And it wasn't until 1988 that Leon Britton, the Home Secretary at the time, decided he was going to give these body of people a whole life order. And he made all these proclamations in Parliament, and he was getting tough on crime, basically, and murderers, if they were going to have mandatory life sentence, in some instances life would mean life. But it wasn't until 1994 that Jeremy was actually told. So he was basically given this whole life order in 1988, but not told until 1994. So it was given retrospectively and in secret. Of course, sort of eventually in 2002, there was a case, and some bright spark realised that a politician should not be setting minimum tariffs. That was for the judiciary to decide.
Who was that Home Secretary that went for the full whole life tariff?
Michael Howard.
Michael Howard. I knew it was. Yeah. I absolutely knew it was. I was just about to say that.
Yeah. He just, there was the whole pocket of all these people who he decided, Hindley and Brady and all those sorts of people that he decided were never going to be released. There was apparently a list of 30, and Jeremy was on that list. But obviously, following this ruling in 2002, all people in Jeremy's situation were allowed to go and have that, ruling tested in court. And of course, it was just rubber stamped. So, it is, although he did subsequently win in the European Court of Human Rights, that his case, his sentence amounts to inhuman treatment when it's not reducible in any way. Of course, the government have been able to sidestep that subsequently with giving the Home Secretary powers to read into what compassionate means, and they're going to wriggle out of it. So as it stands right now, unless we can get back in the Court of Appeal, unless we can get Jeremy completely exonerated, then he has basically death by prison. That's how serious the situation is. So that's why we have to do what we can to get him in the Court of Appeal.
Absolutely.
It's a pretty great situation.
There's only there's 64 prisoners apparently, according to Wikipedia, that have got a whole life tariff. We're talking about people like Peter Sutcliffe. Myra Hindley had one as well, but obviously she's brown bread. So Roy Whiting, Ian Huntley. So it is amongst some pretty, shall we say, unsavoury characters.
Yeah.
How does he feel about that? How does he feel about the fact that he may never be released from prison?
Well,
without any outside help, obviously.
Yeah, I mean, I think, I would think anyone in his position would be pretty angry about his whole life order, particularly the way it was given, because it was retrospective, which it should be lawful. I'm not quite sure how it became lawful, really. It goes, against everything in terms of the rule of law and everything that we hold as a British justice system about retrospect. You cannot be sentenced retrospectively. But it's what happened. But I don't think Jeremy believes that he will be in prison for his whole life. Why would an innocent man believe that? What keeps him going is the fact that he loves his family. He loved his family, and he just keeps going because he knows he's innocent. He knows he's telling the truth. He hasn't wavered from that in 31 years. And there is no way that he will give up and, accept a whole life order. And I don't blame him.
Neither will his campaigners, innit, Judy? We won't accept it either.
We won't accept that. But I do believe he is the only whole life tariff prisoner who is protesting innocence. I don't know of any other person. So I'm not quite sure about Michael Stone. He may be a whole life order, I'm not sure. But Jeremy is in a very unique class of people, really, that his whole life and he is protesting innocence.
I've seen suggestions that Ian Huntley didn't do what he was supposed to do. It's been suggested that it was an American airman at a nearby base, but I don't know if he's actually actively appealing or trying to get to the appeal court. I'm
not actually sure if Ian Huntley is a whole life order or not. I feel like he might not be.
He is, yeah.
He is he? According to Wikipedia? Because I think because of the circumstances that it maybe wasn't as premeditated.
Sorry, I'm going to... because I didn't read that properly. I just saw Ian Huntley's name. It says, however... I'm just going to read the entire thing. However, some of Britain's most notorious murderers are not serving whole life sentences. Yeah. These include convicted child killers Roy Whiting and Ian Huntley.
Yeah.
Right. So yeah, sorry
It's
about
quite.
that.
It's okay. It is quite a specific criteria which they have to meet, and I don't think they quite meet it because it wasn't, multiple victims, premeditated. There's certain elements that they have to fulfil. So I think it's the multiple victim thing, which is the big one, particularly in Jeremy's case. So no, I mean it is something that we will keep going until we can get him into the Court of Appeal. I mean, one of the big things for me, particularly as I've looked at this case over the years, is that I really believe that Sheila was alive in that house. From the moment that they arrived at that farmhouse and saw movement in the window, and then they hot-tailed it back to the police car, radioed that in, and the tactical firearms team were scrambled. And I could list a whole string of lights on, lights off, curtains open, curtains drawn, police in conversation with somebody inside the farmhouse, even
and
to
this is while Jeremy couldn't be in there, could he? Couldn't possibly have been inside the farmhouse.
No, he was outside with the police officers.
Yeah.
And, there was a sighting of perhaps a rifle in the window, which later was said to have been a vacuum cleaner hose. And, it's very contradictory, but I think there is enough doubt there from enough different statements and witness testimony that it creates, the definite possibility that she was alive and moving around that house. And so, it's just up to people to make that leap that a young woman could kill her family. And of course, in the 80s, perhaps we didn't have the cases, perhaps it wasn't reported as strongly. But, you could probably, particularly in America now with women, you could probably name them. It does happen. It certainly happens. So, I think that for me has been a really, really big one. That she was alive in there.
Yeah, and it is interesting. How closely did the police look at Sheila? How closely did they look into her background and into the possibility that maybe this wasn't Jeremy and it was how they'd originally thought it was going to be?
Well, as I say, Jeremy wasn't charged until the 29th of September. So we went from the 7th of August to the 29th of September with a murder-suicide. It initially wasn't Jeremy. They were sure. I mean, as a campaign, one of the things that we've been focused on very heavily this year is the non-disclosure of evidence. And one of the things that we have asked for is a report that was done, before Jeremy was charged, when he was, questioned and then he was released. A DCI Keneally was brought in to do an independent report on the case to see whether there was any involvement of Jeremy and to basically come in as a sort of third party, if you like, and do an overview. And he reported that Sheila was responsible. That the evidence showed that Sheila was responsible for the killings. Now, we didn't know about that report. Nobody knew about that report. The jury never heard about that report. And we only know about this report since 2011. So where is that report? What is in that report? And why was he so absolutely adamant that Sheila was responsible?
Those are absolutely vital questions, obviously, Trudy. What we do usually at this time in the show is we take a short music break and give us time to just refresh our drinks or nip to the bathroom if we need to. And strangely enough, today, when I was getting things set up ready for the show, I just put some random music on. And strangely, the first track that
This is Dr. Judy Wood, and you're listening to Raconteurs News.
And welcome back to Raconteurs News. I'd like to say, before we start the second half of the show, big thanks to Freeman Jack for spinning the tunes as a bit of a warm-up tonight. It was great to listen to them. I don't think I've heard a single one before. And Jack will be pleased to know that a friend of Trudy's actually messaged her and said, wow, they play really strange music on here. I'm sure he'll take that as a compliment. But back to where we were, you just came out with an astounding piece of information while we were listening to that record there, Trudy. Could you please share that with the listeners?
Yeah, I just wanted to get in that you mentioned the trial and the 10-2 majority. Well, not only that, but one of the jury members was asleep. The defence barrister brought it to the attention of the jury, to the judge, I beg your pardon, and it seems that he was nodding off and, not really paying attention. And crucially, it was during Jeremy's testimony. Jeremy's just written a blog on it, actually, for the anniversary of his arrest. And, it's quite astounding. So if you do the maths on this, it's more likely than not that what that sleeping juror was in the guilty party. So had he have been dismissed, at the time it was discussed away from the jury what should be done, and I mean Jeremy just took his counsel's advice really, and he was told, well, do we really want to start the trial all over again? We really need to keep going at this point. And he was young, he didn't really know, and so they carried on. But had that juror been dismissed from the jury and they had continued with 11 members, it's more likely on a balance of probabilities that juror would have been in that 10-pack, and so he would never have been convicted.
Should that not have been grounds for appeal?
Well, I don't think it was grounds for an initial appeal. It was just never brought up because it had been asked and answered, basically. It was dealt with. So, I think the point was lost, really. But, yeah, it does make you wonder, really, whether something should more have been made of it. You would really have thought his defence counsel would have used it and made something of it. But, reflecting back 31 years later, or 30 years later since the trial, it would have made a huge difference. That he would have walked out a free man. Yeah. So it's just another one of these things in this case that just is sent to drive us nuts, really.
And
unfortunately.
He's had 2 appeals. When was
Yes.
the first one, and what was the grounds for the appeal, and why was it rejected? What was the reason given that it was rejected?
Well, as in most first appeals, they're usually on a point of, a very narrow point of law. Usually that the judge misdirected the jury or something of that nature. And that really was the basis of Jeremy's appeal. I'm not sure it even went to a full oral hearing. I think it was just literally put in front of a judge and it was dismissed summarily, really. And I think... Michael attests to that. Probably that's what happens with most first appeals. And I've heard, I've read people say that there's sort of at that time you have to appeal within, I think, 28 days, I think it is. And you're in shell shock. You don't know why you've been found guilty. You've told the truth. You believe that you shouldn't be there. You shouldn't be found guilty. And often you don't have a chance to really regroup and get your head together on it. But unfortunately, that's what happened. The second appeal in 2002 was based on a very narrow point to do with DNA, and unfortunately, that point was lost because of cross-contamination issues that were a possibility at that time. So, work has to be done to undermine that further. But it's very, very difficult when the British judicial system get it wrong. To right those wrongs. They hold on to their mistakes for grim death, and they don't want to admit their mistakes. They don't want to, put it right. So this is, therein lies the problem, really. And the CCRC, have to apply what they call a real possibility test. And it seems for Jeremy that benchmark is very, very high. I think 31 years of talking about this and everything that we now know, everything we can undermine, they're not going to let him go back easily. There's got to be some very, very strong points. And, I always think you need to look at this case in a very holistic way. You need to look at it as a whole. And unfortunately, you can't ever retry the trial. And because of the massive amount of disclosure issues that we've got going on, the truth isn't really, as it should be, that we don't have all the facts to present because we can't get, these points. The CCRC tried to use their powers in 2011, and Essex Police just told them they couldn't find the call logs, and they couldn't possibly do this, and they couldn't possibly look for that, and it's just fob off after fob off, really. So I've just recently
taken over.
Pardon?
I think politics have taken over a bit.
Yeah, I mean, I think
case.
I've just written to the disclosure. We focused as a campaign. Jeremy did an open letter in 2012. Last December 2015, and appealed to Essex Police basically to release the evidence. And nothing has happened on that. He's been accused of circumnavigating the process, but of course, that's not the case. Court orders were in place in 2002 prior to the appeal for the prosecution and the police to release all the evidence in this case. And we now know that's not the case. Those court orders were not fulfilled. So I wrote in September to Elizabeth Truss, the new Justice Minister, and I have asked her for a meeting so that we can discuss these issues and of what public importance they are, really. There's so many things that we don't have.
How did you find the appeal process, Michael? As somebody who's been through it, can you sort of give us some idea as to what it's like to go through?
Well, my first appeal I can remember quite well. It was in 1990, and we were taken up the Court of Appeal, and we were left down in the cells, and it was my probation officer who come to see me, and she said, have you heard anything from the courts? And I said, no, we've been down the cells all day. So we didn't even know we'd lost that appeal. My barrister was just about to get into his car when he had a tap on the shoulder from my probation officer and said, you better go in there and tell the boys what's gone on. So she dragged him back in, and he said to me, it's the end of the road. So I tried to grab him by the throat and say, well, I'll show you end of the road. You know what I mean? Because I wasn't having none of it, I mean, don't tell me it's the end of the road when I hadn't done anything, and I went completely mad. They had to get him out of there. And the whole process, was over in, a day, and the judge just rubber stamps what the trial judge said, what the jury said, and they've done the same with Jeremy's. It's exactly the same. Well, with the second appeal, it was totally different, with mine. I was one of the fortunate ones that we had an outside police force who came in and looked at the case, and they said that everything I said 10 years ago about being handcuffed to the radiators and being abused in the police station, they could prove it. So I was one of the lucky ones. Now, going back to Jeremy's case, these chief constables who were refusing to disclose all this evidence should be done for contempt of court, because that's what it is. If there's a court order there for whatever reason that says you have got to disclose this evidence, why isn't the courts reluctant to get these chief constable up there and say, explain yourself, sir? Why are you releasing these documents?
They're
an appeal, isn't they, Trudy?
Yeah, I mean, if I could put it into context, why we know what is missing and why we've asked for disclosure on certain items is that prior to 2007, any evidence that was gathered as part of any police inquiry was put under automatic PII. So a defendant in a trial or an appeal could not see those documents. And so after the appeal was lost, those documents were just languishing in counsel's office, and nothing was happening. The campaign at the time were just working as hard as they could, but nothing was happening. And then the campaign was contacted in 2011 and asked, would they like all these boxes, because the law had changed and this evidence now could be reviewed by Jeremy and his campaign team. So our founder member took possession of these boxes of evidence, and it was really too late for the submissions in 2012. We're talking, thousands of pieces of evidence to actually go through and systematically look at. And so what's happened in the last 5 or 6 years is that, somebody has gone through those documents, they have scanned them all, put them on a massive document database, and slowly but surely Jeremy and campaign team members have gone through those pieces of evidence and gathered new evidence. Some of the evidence has been, been able to refute earlier points that we weren't able to do before. But importantly, those boxes have Holmes references. So they are part, of a computerized police system. And they have indexes. And in some cases, those indexes are incomplete. So there's reference numbers, but when you look for that piece of evidence, it's missing. In some boxes, there's nothing. And we also know that there's 20 boxes missing. So, that couldn't have been known in 2002. And it's only been known in the last 4 or 5 years. And so this, we always say this is not a fishing exercise. This isn't just give us everything you've got. This is, firstly, it all should have been released in 2002 under a court order, and it was not. And secondly, we've asked for 10 very specific items which are referenced, and we know they make up partly, in some cases, Jeremy's alibi. So they are very specific.
And they're significant as well.
Yeah, very significant and very significant. So they cannot say that we are just, asking for everything and anything, which under common law disclosure, they won't allow. You can't go on forever just saying we want everything. But that's not what we're doing. So it's very, erroneous for the Essex Police to say that for the sake of the victims, for the sake of closure in this case, that we should, basically shut up and go away, because we're not going to. Because what we're asking for is very specific, and we know they exist, i.e. Keneally's report. We know it exists. It's been talked about in other documents, and so we know it exists.
Well, the significant thing as well, Trudy, this the evidence we're after changes the whole picture of what was said at trial, which the jury didn't have, were not privy to see. And I mean, with all the new evidence which has come out, and all the stuff we're finding all the time, it hasn't been placed before any jury. So, it's in the interest of justice that the new appeal comes about, because had the jury known about this evidence, the Court of Appeal would ask this one question: would it have changed the jury's mind? And we're saying, as the campaigners, yes, it would. It would have changed completely. And that's why the importance of these documents being released. But, what really bugs me more than anything is, who are these chief constables to say that we cannot have these documents? There's court orders in place. They're not above the law. Why are they doing this? It seems like it's everything by accident design is being done by Essex Police to stop Jeremy Bamber from proving his innocence.
You see, their gang is bigger than your gang, because if it was the other way round, their gang would be banging on your door. Absolutely,
I think it is. But whilst they got people like Trudi on board and myself on board, we're not going away. I mean, I fought a good fight. I've been out now 19 years. I'm still banging away at it. Trudy's still there. There's many more people coming on board, and more people by the day are joining the campaign to free Jeremy Bamber. And it's going to get bigger and bigger and bigger. And, we ain't going anywhere. No matter what they do, we will find that breakthrough. And when we find the breakthrough, they're going to have egg on their face.
Well, one of the biggest issues as well that you were talking, Mike, there about what the jurors didn't hear is that, part of the reason why Jeremy felt that there might have been a problem the night before he left was the fact that they had discussed at dinner that the children might be permanently fostered. And, the jury were told that Jeremy was the only source of that information, that he was the only person that had ever mentioned that. And that is not true. The foster carers were in place. They had been used before. And what's more, they gave statements, and those statements were never shown to the jury.
Well, these are the key things. I mean, there's so much since 1985, since Jeremy's trial, there's so much evidence which hasn't been placed before any jury or any judge. And on that basis alone, it is in the interest of justice that this evidence is now placed before a jury, or more importantly, a judge, to decide the case. And we're not getting the opportunity. And this is where it's all wrong.
In 1996, despite a court order to the contrary, special branch authorised the destruction of all the illegally authorised the destruction of all the exhibits in this case. So the only thing that remained was the rifle and the silencer, or the silencers. So, basically, there are no bullet casings. There are no, carpets. Her nightdress. They've gone, completely gone, and we have the documents. And there was, they were told not to destroy them. The mind boggles.
Well, I mean, this has been it's been the same. And I've been involved in some US cases, on the death penalty. Naturally, I'm against the death penalty, and I'm an advocate for that as well, to get rid of that. And
you're living proof it don't work.
Yeah,
well, it doesn't work. I mean, if the death penalty would have been brought in or still on the statute books, I would have been the first to go. The Birmingham 6, Guildford 4, we know that, But in America, they're having the same problems. It's like Jeremy's case. There's many cases out there in the US where they're having the same problems of getting the disclosure, or they're destroying the evidence. That's the thing. They're not keeping it. They should keep the evidence until that person is either out of prison or is resolved one way or another. And the fact is, they know they can't say that Jeremy is not fighting his case. He's fought it from day one. So on that basis alone, they shouldn't destroy anything, because the possibilities with the advancement of DNA evidence and other forensic evidence, which may show that it was Sheila, and they've robbed him of that opportunity in a sense, by destroying some of those documents.
Yeah, I mean, one of the things that we're focused on as the campaign now, and we're a team, we're a good team, and Mike's part of our team. We've just launched this crowd justice platform, and because basically with Jeremy is not eligible for legal aid. There is no legal aid to investigate sort of miscarriages of justice. And, you don't have the programs like there used to be, the rough justices. I know there's a recent one that Inside Justice have done, but by and large, you don't get these programs made anymore. Yeah,
the crap. Yeah. They used to be made with actually wanting to get to the truth rather than to promote one side or another, and to entertain people. And all they do is they produce a one-sided argument which just reinforces the official story, the way that it's people perceive it.
Yeah. I mean, what has been great is the making a murderer type things, and the the serial in America. It would be fabulous if we could get something made like that about Jeremy, because
I was just about to make a comparison to that case to the what's his name? It's Avery, isn't it? Steve Avery. Steve. I know that the guy that was convicted with him has recently been released, so that should give him a chance. But I was thinking about that as you were talking.
Yeah, so that would be fabulous. But as I say, going back to the crowd justice, we need to raise money. We need to get forensic work done. CCRC have consistently stopped short of using their powers and putting money into forensics. And so if we can raise money and we can get this money raised to get certain issues, forensic reports done ahead of time, we decided to leave no stone unturned, basically. Let's go back to basics. Let's look at everything we thought we knew. Maybe we didn't know it. And let's look at some new stuff. We've put out a couple of pieces of evidence recently, possible suicide letters that Sheila had written, which is, were in those boxes in 2011 and had been dismissed as illegible. But when you look at them, they're quite disturbing. And from the provenance of them, we believe that they were found in the house and handed to the police on the 7th or the 8th of August. And they were never looked at. They were never properly transcribed. No one's ever done any forensic work on them. But of course, the problem we have, again, is that we don't have the originals. We only have photocopies. So we're hoping that, the forensic science people who have agreed to look at them will be able to, use very bad photocopies. So, let's hope. And it does go towards Sheila's very disturbed state of mind. I mean, we know she wrote diaries, but we don't have her diaries either. She was very disturbed. So it's on the crowd justice site that we've just launched. We talk about the windows issue, and I don't know if you looked at the page. I know a few people have looked at it and have been quite shocked that it was an apparent escape route for Jeremy. The house was all locked and secured from the inside, and so the idea being that he climbed out the kitchen window and then pulled the window too, and everything locked down on its catches, and everything. Now, the photograph that was showed to the jury showed the sort of vertical catch at a very slight 7 o'clock position, if you like. So you could slam it shut, but it didn't quite go flush against the window. And you can see from the angle that the jury was shown that it looked like it was slightly up. Well, when you look at another picture, which we found in 2011, that's not the case. That window is secured and fastened on its peg. And we know that from statements. And what's more, the police tested it and they couldn't get it to shut properly. So
when you're talking about you're raising some money, I looked at the page earlier on. It's not a massive amount of money, is it, that you're looking for initially for this particular phase? I think it's something like $4,000, isn't it? Something
because
along those lines to get that work done.
Yeah, we have to be realistic. I mean, it is an all or nothing platform. So if we went for, I think it says on the page you can stretch later, and our hope is to raise £10,000, but it's an all or nothing platform. So if we don't meet that target within 30 days, we get nothing. People pledge, and if we reach target, then their credit cards are garnished and we get the money. So it was, there was no point in aiming too high. We have to be realistic. We hope.
All I was saying is that if you're going to put, because it's such a modest amount, that even a small amount, even if you can donate a small amount, it's going to make a difference.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean that's our hope, is that I think when I looked at the page earlier before we came on air, it was sort of 43 people had donated, which is fabulous because we're about 33% of the way there. But what I'd like to see is hundreds of people just give a £5. That's all people can do. Let's have this as a movement. Let's raise the money together as a public that is outraged. That Jeremy is basically being held hostage by a criminal justice system that refuses to right its wrong, and that there has to be something wrong with a society that allows that to keep happening.
So if somebody's listening to this on the podcast or listening on YouTube or something like that, what would they do to be able to find where they could donate? What would they need to type into their favourite search engine? I'm not going to mention any names.
Well, it's on our website, of course, so they could always go to www.jeremy-bamber.co.uk, and the link is there. Or if you do that search engine search and put in crowd justice, and it will bring up the page. And Jeremy's a very young 24-year-old face will be on the front of the page. And it's very easy just to click, and you can, it gives you the amounts, or you can choose your own amount. But as I say, no amount is too small. I would rather see hundreds of people get behind this and really make a difference than, put a burden on one person, really. That's our aim, is to try and, get people outraged as we are.
Well, if you had 46 before the show, the good news is 43 before the show. The good news is you're up to 46 already. So let's hope we can
fantastic.
Give that a bit of a push along. I've posted the link in the chat room, so hopefully that might help. And when we put the podcast up on the website, we'll put all your links on there as well. So
brilliant. Thanks, Andy.
No problem. So, we've got about half an hour left. Are there any issues that you would like to have covered that you haven't so far?
Very good question. I think we've done pretty well on the disclosure issues. I think that is the biggest issue. Mm-hmm. If people would like to contact their MPs or contact the Justice Minister, that would be fantastic. It really would. I think public pressure is really important in these cases. I often think of Jeremy, we talked about the historical cases, the cases that led to the forming of the CCRC. Jeremy's from that sort of era, really. I always think of him a bit of, always the bridesmaid, never the bride, as it were. I'd really like to see him walk free like we've seen everybody else walk free. It must be some sort of, almost psychological torture that when you're innocent and in prison, we talked about this before, when you're innocent and in prison and you've been there so long, it really is some sort of cruel and unusual, event. And I just think that, he's the last bastion of this era, when perhaps policing wasn't what it should be, and, they were allowed to get away with doing these things. We now know, with cases like Hillsborough, of course, redacted statements, police officers, sort of changing witness statements, altering things. It happened, and it happened in Jeremy's case. We've got exhibit labels changed, we've got reference numbers altered. In 1991, a whole bunch of scientists said that their statements had been altered without their knowledge in terms of the sound moderator. So, we know it was happening. We know it was going on. And a lot of these things have never been tested in court. So it does go back to what Mike was saying, really, is that, we've got a whole list of things that the jury never heard, that's never been tested. And so it's really important to do that. It's a very high benchmark that he has to meet to do this. So, it's a case of keep digging, and we will get there.
Sorry, I just wanted to. How's Jeremy himself? How's he coping with? Do you have much communication with him directly? And what does he do to pass the time in prison? Is he reading books, looking at things, or is he keeping himself fit? That sort of thing. What makes him tick?
Yeah, he does it. He works. He actively goes to the gym. He keeps very fit. He's kept himself in very good shape, and he is. By and large, he works 24/7 on his case. That is his motivation. It's his case. I wouldn't say I speak to him every day, but I speak to him most days, depending on if there's any, sort of issues going on or there's something we need to discuss. Often I'll speak to him daily. I do, I have visited him. I've visited him a couple of times, and I mean, he's I always say he's a really ordinary guy in a very extraordinary situation. He's utterly determined to clear his name, and in lots of ways he's very like all of us. He spent his most of his adult life in a prison system.
Is there any way can people write to him? Send him letters and send him letters of support and things like that. And it's part of the things that he might need, that he might find helpful, like stamps or things like that people can send off.
Yeah, he is not allowed to receive stamps now, I don't believe, but he can receive money into his account, which he uses for phone calls and basic things he needs. You're not allowed to send anything into a Category A prison. You're not allowed to send, sort of anything in terms of clothing or, luxury items or food or anything, nothing at all. So he has to buy everything that he needs. So, that's the case. So he works and money goes on his account that way. And I'm sure campaigners do send money in for him. So, that's always helpful. And if you're going to write to him, all the details are on our website. But if you're going to write to him, then it's really important to put a stamped addressed envelope in if you want to reply, basically. Often he can't keep up with his mail. So, it is a movement. As I say, I'd like to see a bigger movement, but we've definitely got a lot of public support. Mm-hmm. We've got a fantastic campaign going. We took the decision in December last year to register as a limited company. We had been working as a sort of grassroots campaigning team, really. And, we were often offered donations and didn't really know what to do with them and, to legitimately say yes to them. And so we took the decision to register as a limited company so that we are under scrutiny. We will produce accounts. We will account for every penny we spend. And, hopefully that, gives a legitimacy to what we're doing, really. We're a team of, professionals and academics. And, we just give our skills free. And we do what we can, and it's, it often turns into a 24/7 a day for us, but that's what we do. And we've got people like Michael, who's given his time and efforts, and to do what we do. And we've had Peter Tatchell speak out for us, which has been brilliant. And, if you go on our website, there's a whole list of patrons and supporters, people high profile, and, people who do believe in us as a campaign and believe in Jeremy's innocence, which is really, really important.
Michael, what was important to you when you were, campaigning to be released, and while you were inside, what were the things that people either said or gave to you or sent you that gave you comfort and made things easier?
Well, when I used to get letters from from Ireland, from Australia, from France. My campaigners really pushed the boat out and tried to get as many people as involved in different countries and people as much as they could. And I mean, when you've got a letter from people, sending you in money, send you in heartwarming little cards with little notes on there, just saying, listen, we're thinking of you, we believe you're innocent and we're right behind you. And the next minute you know, these people turn into become your friends and they come to visit you. And that's what happened. That's how I managed to get many people to join the campaign, just because they'd seen something in the papers about me and they looked and researched about the case. And I mean, that gave me hope. I mean, we were quite lucky because the media were on our side. Once we produced the evidence about this police officer and what he had done with the confessions outside the cells and stuff, people was taking notice and saying, well, hang on, and this is what people should be doing in Jeremy's case. If they applied the same principles they did to mine, to Jeremy's case, then Jeremy should have been out a long, long time ago, maybe even before me, because he went in there before me. But getting letters of support from the public does does spur you on. You know, I was lucky in a sense, like I had the ability. I studied law when I was in prison, you know, and I knew my rights, so I knew what had gone wrong in my case. So then I was badgering other people then, but it was the public who spurred me on. You know, they really did. Some of the heartwarming letters, I've still got quite a lot of letters up in the loft and everything, you know, which I've kept for personal reasons. Because, I mean, when I was at my lowest ebb, you get a letter from somebody you've never heard of before, and they want to join your campaign and they want to do something, or a TV documentary's being made about you because of somebody who's taken an interest. It sort of, it just made me alive, you know. I was like, how can I put it? I just had so much get up and go about me, like Jeremy has, you know. Jeremy's never lost that get up and go, you know. And the one thing I wanted to say about Jeremy, you know, like you mentioned about earlier on that he, you know, when he was, you know, the people who were never getting out, he shouldn't be in that bracket for a number of reasons. And I know Jeremy, he's a really kind person. He's not a horrible person. He's not a nasty person. And to put him in the same bracket as some of these others, I know he feels aggrieved, but so do I for him. Because I know that's not him. If people knew Jeremy Bamber and seen the person that he was, this is why I think it's important and why the government will not let him go on television to put his case like I was allowed to do, because the public are going to warm to him and see that he's just an ordinary guy. As Trudy said, he's just like me and you know, you'd buy him a pint in the pub. You know what I mean? I mean, he's just a normal guy, and, you know, it's just very frustrating. But
my colleague is texting me like crazy and saying I have to say that he can receive stamps now.
Oh,
that's great news.
So apparently the rules have changed and he now is allowed stamps. So anyone wants to send him stamps, send him stamps. So I thought I have to get that in. Otherwise they won't forgive me tomorrow.
I hope a lot of people write to him I can keep up his spirits, because the more people who write to him and the more people who join the campaign, go and have a look on the website. Have a look for the evidence yourself. Don't take our word for it. Have a look at the evidence. That's all I say to anybody who's you know, got an open mind. Don't go in there with a closed mind. Go in there and just look at the evidence, see for yourself what's on the website, see what's out there, and then come back and tell me that he is an innocent. Because I'll tell you what, I think that there'll be a lot of people joining the campaign tonight. I really do.
I mean, people often ask me what to say to him. You know, what do I say? And I would say, well, you know, he loves to hear cheery news. He loves to be kept in touch with the outside world, and just tell him you believe in him and keep fighting and keep strong. And, you know, importantly, Jeremy is not a broken man. The system has not broken him. And I would love to see him on a televised interview. I would love to see that.
So would I.
Because I think, you know, he would get his message across. And, you know, he is a very ordinary man who is fighting for his life here. And I think that, you know, it would be amazing to get him on camera. He's obviously had written interviews previously, but getting him a televised interview is very, very difficult. But, you know, perhaps it will happen. You know, let's hope. We can only try.
Well, that's all we can do.
Yeah, I wonder what the chances would be of getting a Skype call to him.
Well, you know, they have video link, so stranger things have happened. You can video link with his lawyers, and obviously, you know, I think often defendants don't even go to court these days, do they? They all do a video link to the courts. So
interesting point, isn't it?
No, I did see it was raised by a couple of people today. I think Richard D. Hall was the one I saw. He was asking why was it that the alleged killer in the Joe Cox murder didn't go to court. He gave his evidence via video link, which seems slightly strange. Quite a few people suggesting that perhaps he was wearing an earpiece so he could give all the right answers. But we've had some really encouraging comments from the chat room tonight, and it's been a very busy chat room, which I always find encouraging. And we've got Society has posted quite a bit about Michael Howard and his links to Soma Oil and Gas, which was investigated not long back by the Serious Fraud Office. And also Paul Webster, who's been on our show many times, lovely guy, and he's saving people money explaining to them how gas, water and electric are free, Paul puts the cuts are in disarray. We are having so much impact now. Great stuff. Thanks for that, Paul. And we need more people to join in this campaign and hopefully get the job done.
What would you say, Trudy or Michael? Mm-hmm. What would you if you could give a message that you think Jeremy would like to give out to people tonight? Anybody that's listening to this, whenever it is, what would that message be? You can both do it. It's up to you which way. Who goes first?
Let Trudy go first, ladies first.
Oh, you're such a gentleman, Mike, always the gent. Well, I think he would just say, keep fighting for me, believe in me, because the truth is out there. And, it's appalling that it's been hidden for so long. And, he's told the truth from day one. And he's never wavered on his message. And, go look at the website, go look at what we've written, go look at what's been analysed, and public support is really hugely important. And we have a huge wish list of forensic issues we'd like to get analysed, but without funding, it will be almost impossible. But I did do the Euro Millions tonight, so you can live in hope that perhaps that 112 million will come in tonight and it'll make all the difference. But no, just keep fighting, really, and join the campaign and spread the word that Jeremy's innocent.
Well, I can only basically repeat what Trudy have said, in a lot of ways. But I'd also like to add, the message that we are not going away. Jeremy's not going away. Join us. Get behind us. Anything you can do, it doesn't matter how small you can donate, whether it's £1, £2, everything helps towards what we're doing. And I suppose if everybody, like Trudy said earlier on, if everybody could afford a £5, we would get to the target and then we could get fresh evidence. But without we need the public behind us. And I hope in time that more and more public will get behind us with programs like yours, what we're doing now, because this is what it's all about. I'm out now. It's not about my case. It's not about, I don't like talking about my case, to be honest with you. I'd rather talk about Jeremy and how we can get him out. 31 years, that man, and he's still not broken. You got to take your hat off to him for staying sane, because I know I was going insane after 11 years and 43 days. This is a remarkable man who needs our help and deserves our help. And, my message to the public is get behind us, have a look at the campaign and do what you can.
I think I'll add as well, if I can, that the disclosure is vital, and public pressure on people like Elizabeth Trust and on Essex Police to comply with those court orders that they flouted illegally will be huge. I think if we can get people to really understand that message, that if we can make it as an important public issue, because it could happen to anybody, it could happen to any of us, that we could be in that situation and a system works against us and there's nothing that we can do. So, write to your MPs, write to the Justice Secretary, and keep the pressure going. Public is really important, very important. So, partly it is about getting the funding, but for forensics, but it is definitely more important that we get disclosure on everything that we need. It's a massive issue, and it's not fair and it's not right.
Well, according to Article 6, it says everyone's entitled to a fair hearing. Well, how can you have a fair hearing if all the documents are not being disclosed? And that is the big issue in itself. And no wonder that Theresa May wants to get rid of the Human Rights Act, because it's going to hinder people like Jeremy, because she's putting the obstacles in the way. This is why we need to get him now. Mm-hmm. I really do.
When I said earlier we had a busy chat room, I did notice we had my old mate Tom from Enemy Within Radio logged in, and I know Tom doesn't listen all the time, so I'm quite encouraged that he's listening to this one. So I'm very hopeful that you'll get interviews on other radio stations as a result of this, and hopefully that will help put a bit more impetus into the campaign, get a few more people on board, and help you to reach your target sooner.
That's fantastic. Thanks, Andy. That's our hope, that we can, get as much public, sort of out there, get the message going, and keep it going. I mean, it's very difficult to get press. It's very difficult. I mean, I think they think, here they are banging on again. Bamber's been banging on for 31 years. Why doesn't he be quiet? And we have had to resort to all sorts of things to try and get some exposure. But we'd rather be talking about the issues and how important they are, and have people look at what the evidence is rather than other things we've had to resort to. So it's really vital. This is a great platform to be able to discuss the issues at length. Really.
Sorry, I just wanted. There was just one sort of question that I thought that would sort of bring us right round to in a huge circle. I think that we've gone on. We've got about 13 minutes left. My question is pretty simple, really, and I don't want you to speculate here. I just want you to give me some facts. And Key Bono, who benefits from Jeremy Bamber being in prison? Who benefits?
Well, he didn't inherit all the money in the end. He was the adopted son, and I think there were key members of his extended family who didn't want that to happen, and they of course inherited the money, so they benefited.
Are we talking what a sizable amount of money, I'm assuming?
Well, I mean, we're talking about a business that was thriving at the time, which was subsequently run into the ground. But we're also talking about shares in a caravan park, which yields a huge amount of money. We're also talking about a lot of land. I mean, of course, what Jeremy didn't know at the time was that Neville had purchased pockets of land for certain of the relatives. And so, of course, had he have decided to sell off that land or, done something with that land, they would have obviously missed, they would have lost their livelihood. So I think partly that was what happened. I mean, I think there's a statement somewhere from his uncle who called him the cuckoo in the nest. He was the adopted son who wasn't quite rightly biologically theirs, and why should he be getting all the money? So I mean, Jeremy would have inherited everything that they owned, and Neville owned a lot of their land. So,
well, something we often see in the injustices and in the justice system and the police failings, shall we say, is we see the old spectre of Freemasonry rearing its ugly head. And what I'd love to know, and I don't suppose we'll ever find out, is how many of those people who actually benefit from Jeremy being in jail are actually Freemasons. Because I think that might be quite a pivotal piece of information.
Yeah, I mean, there have been suspicions around that. It's not something I know a great deal about, if I'm honest. But I know there has been talk about some connection. I'm probably certain of the police officers were involved in the Freemasons. I think that was very, a popular thing to do at that time, particularly. And of course, the family did employ one of the police officers after the trial was over, and he went to work at the caravan park doing security, I believe. So, something's not right about that, I feel.
No, but, that doesn't sound at all suspicious, does it?
No.
You would think that there would be some law firm out there now. If Jeremy was to be released, to be exonerated and be released, then surely there'd be a huge legal battle going on over some land. So you would have thought that some law firm might think, right, we'll chuck a bit of money at this, because if we can get Jeremy out, then we're going to be his solicitors and we're going to make fortunes out of the the trying to get the land back that was actually his. So I don't know if any.
I'm not a lawyer. I don't know what the legal connotations would be of that. I mean, people give testimony in all honesty, and they believe what they believe, and whether that leads to things later is is open for interpretation. It's I don't know what a legal basis would be on that, and as I say, I certainly don't know anything about the Freemason connection or anything. It's not something that I've really I've heard whispers, but not something that I really know anything about that is connected to this case. So it's it's just one of those urban myths probably that's been floated around for years, but not something that we've ever focused on at all, and neither will we. So
no, I mean you're focusing on the facts, aren't you? The evidence.
Absolutely, we only focus on what we can prove and what we can provide evidence for. Basically, it's that's the way we are. If we don't make statements, we can't back up with facts. Everything we say, we've either got a witness testament, or we've got documents that say that. So that's really important, that we do that, because that gives us integrity always.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think me and Andy were being a little bit naughty then, bringing up the Freemasons and all that sort of thing. Right. I mean, it's been a fascinating conversation with you both. It's been fantastic. I'm sure you agree, Andy.
Absolutely, yeah. It's one of my favourite shows so far. It's a subject that I remember the incident happening, but it's something that kind of slipped off my radar over the years, and I'm really glad that we got you back on to talk about it, and I hope we can push things forward a little bit by doing what we've done.
Brilliant.
Yeah, we're very grateful.
Okay, so we're coming to the end of the 2 hours now. I ask you, if you would please, Trudy, to give out as many links as you can where people can donate, join the campaign, contact you, whatever.
Yeah, well, go to our website, www.jeremy-bamber.co.uk. You can see all the links there. We have Twitter at Bamber Tweets, at Free Bamber Now, the JB Campaign Limited page, and the J Bamber Facebook Twitter. We have a Facebook page as well, the Justice for Jeremy Bamber. We have an Instagram page at Jeremy Bamber, and obviously go to the Crowd Justice site, and you'll see our link there to donate to our forensic science page there, where you can donate money, and let's get this $4,000 raised in 30 days, and we can start getting some real work done, which will hopefully get Jeremy back in the Court of Appeal.
Absolutely.
Thanks very much.
I think that's what we'd all love to see. And thank you so much for coming on tonight. I'll just say a few words before we wrap up about what we've got lined up for the rest of the month, because I think that was it.
Can I just
Please
say, when you speak to Jeremy, can you give him our best?
Oh yes, please do.
From Raconteurs News, and I'm sure everybody in the chat box, and we really hope that one day justice does prevail.
Thank you very much.
Yeah, thank you.
Yeah, I'll pass that on, and thanks very much. I know that he'll be really heartened by all the support and your kind words, so that's fabulous, and thanks so much for having us on. It's been a pleasure. Thanks.
Thank you so much. This has been an absolutely blinding start to October, and the next show we've got is next Tuesday. We've got a guy who goes by the name of Deja Vu in our chat box, and Dave seems to know quite a few of the people who are in the chat box, and he contacted me after the Anthony Carlin show, where Anthony arrested the judge in Northern Ireland, and said he'd like to come up about his own mortgage case. So I'm really looking forward to talking to Dave, because he's a really switched on guy, and he knows how to handle himself in the court. So I think that'll be a fascinating one next Tuesday. Then the following Tuesday, the 18th, we've got a guy from Texas, but he's actually a Brummie. and he's got a real strong Brummie accent, so get your phrase books at the ready. But we've got Nick Redfern, who's written numerous books about UFOs, men in black, women in black. So that'll be something a bit different out there, something we're looking at covering perhaps a little more in the future. And then that will be followed on the 25th by a guy I met over at Nottingham a few months ago at a meetup, a gentleman called Max Stutley. And Max is he's looks at the law, legality, and also the way words and language are used. And he's going to come on and be talking about the glosser, which I know very little about, and I'm looking forward to learning about. And we will be doing a pre-record on the 14th with Gordon Bowden, Peter Bromfield, David Veitch, and hopefully Stevie Ritchie from Pandora's Box Investigations. And if there's still a space there, we'll probably put that out before Doc Rock on a Thursday night. So next show on Raconteurs News will be Dr. Rock, Thursday night, 9 o'clock. And then we've got Keno's music shows from 7 till 10 on Friday night. Mark Windows is on every Sunday at 8 p.m. And Unique Lee will be back, same as he was last night, next Monday from 8 till 11 p.m. So hope we've something for everyone out there. We'll be back same time next week. Thanks for listening, everyone. Big thanks to Trudi and Michael, and thank you, Jason, and thanks to